My fellow bassists, welcome back. Alright, so playing regular diatonic bass lines and solos is fun, and it's honestly all you need to do probably about 80 or 90% of the time, but sometimes it does sound cool to play some stuff that's a little bit outside of the key. Since you're playing outside of the key, this is creatively called outside playing by a lot of people, and it's just a really cool way to add a bit of new flavor, mix things up, surprise people a bit, and just generally get out of that rigid diatonic box. A lot of your favorite players do this, including people like Jacko and Henrik Linder, Victor Wooten, and that guy Charles Bear too. But the key is you've got to do it pretty sparingly, because at some point if you just keep playing outside and never within the key, then it kind of just sounds like you actually don't know what you're doing, and it's just really jarring and a bit painful for the listener. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite approaches to outside playing that you can use sparingly just to kind of surprise people and create a cool effect. The first one revolves around diminished chords. So if you're unfamiliar with diminished chords, it's literally a chord built on minor thirds. So you take a root note, let's go with C for now, and then you go up a minor third to E flat, up another minor third to G flat or F sharp, and then one more minor third to A, and there you've got your diminished chord. In each key, there is only one diatonic diminished chord, and that's the 7th degree of the scale. So for example, if you're in the key of C major, the only diatonic diminished chord is the B diminished, B, D, and F. But we're going to be playing outside, so we don't need to worry too much about playing the correct diatonic diminished chord. We can play a pattern that revolves around pretty much any diminished chord that we want, as long as we get back into the key immediately after we're done with the lick. So here's the lick. You're going to just be moving this little pattern around, and it starts like this. You pluck the D string, and then you hammer on to fret 15, and then you pluck up a tritone, which is 16 on the G string. So the whole thing is like this. And then all we're going to do is just move that little pattern around by either minor thirds, because that's what diminished chords are built upon, or tritones, because tritones, or flat fives, are essentially just 2 minor thirds, or double the distance of a minor third. So now that you've got that concept, you can just move this little thing around like this. As long as you're always moving it around by minor thirds or tritones, it's going to maintain that diminished quality. If you start adding other random intervals, like you just go from there to... it doesn't sound like a diminished chord anymore. There is a little variation you can do on this, where you just add another pluck. That just gives you a little bit of rhythmic variation. All right, but how do you put this into the context of a bass line? Well, I'm going to get a little bit of a just generic funk groove going here, something like this. And then I'm going to play that for you, and I'm going to throw this lick into ends of phrases and things like that, so you can hear how you can use it in context. Remember, as I play each of these examples, I'm not expecting you to actually play an outside lick like every 2 bars when you're in a performance. In a real musical setting, you're going to want to use it much more sparingly. This is just for demonstrational purposes. All right, the next method is called the half-step approach. This is just where you take a chord shape that's within the key of the song that you're playing. So for example, on that groove that we just did, it could be E minor 7, which looks like this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to play that again, but we're going to add a half step either above or below each of the chord tones, like this. And here's the half step below. So as you can hear, it still sounds like you're in the key, but you're adding a little bit of that outside flavor to it. But you know, in the key of E minor, there's other diatonic chords that you can apply this method to. It doesn't just have to be E minor 7, it could be B7. So then it would be like this. Or I'm going to show you it in context now. And then the last method that I use a lot is the constant structure method. As you might be able to guess from the name, this is where you just take a little bit of a cell or motif. It could just be like 4 to 6 notes, and then you just move it around chromatically. One of my favorites is this cell. So it's actually just 3 notes, and then I just move it chromatically down usually. But of course, you want to end on a note that's within the key so that you're back at home base and it sounds like you did it deliberately. But you can do this with any lick you want, really. Like, here's the dipstick lick. Another one I do is this kind of pentatonic cell that then becomes really weird because I'm moving it chromatically. I find that these ones sound best if you start off with the cell being in the key. So for example, that last one I played, those are all notes that are within the key of E minor. But then, you know, you get way outside of the key. But then I end in the key again. Starting and ending within the key is the key to making it sound coherent and intentional. Here's the constant structure method in context. So those are my 3 favorite methods for playing outside. Of course, there's tons of others. But again, the most important thing here is to use these ideas sparingly. Unless you're deliberately trying to play a piece of music that you want to sound harsh and maybe even difficult to listen to. In general, you want to be using these sparingly so that it's just more of a cool surprise. A nice little treat that just adds a little bit of a different flavor. Of course, the best way to internalize all of this is to practice improvising along with backing tracks. and inserting these concepts in there. You can get that funk backing track on Patreon along with literally hundreds of other exercises and lessons and tabs, including more lessons on improvisation, music theory, and bass line construction. Just slap the link in the description if you want to get those. Thanks so much for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next lesson.